Hello and welcome back to the Schooner Pod. I'm Bobby Howard. With me today, as always, we've got Jameson Maxwell and Ty Lee. And we're about to do a show that we've done. This is our third time doing it. It's kind of the bookend of our tier maker rankings of OU's position groups. We did this in spring. We did this midway through the season. And now that the season is over, the dust is settled, we're going to break it down, see how Team 129 did as a unit. Okay. And look, before we get into that, though, we got to ask, because Ty, as viewers of the show know, you finished last in the weekend spread and have been dealing with that just atrocious mix that Jameson concocted to wake as your alarm clock. How has it been so far? And I don't know. Have you started researching 2024 football yet to try to claw out a last, or?
No, I mean, I know what I did wrong this year, and that was the same thing that Joe Constiglione continues to do. That's count on Brent Venables to win games. So, we saw what happened there. But thankfully, we will not be dealing with Dillon Gabriel anymore, who is featured in that audio clip, of course.
Touchdown Dillon Gabriel.
Yeah, I think I hear it more in that than I did all season. So certainly more than Oregon fans will. They will learn shortly of that situation. But yeah, it's honestly, it's not that bad. It starts out actually very, very mellow if you catch it very early on, which is fortunate because I don't think they necessarily thought that through too much making it. So it's a fortunate turn of events. But yeah, it's, as I said this morning, I think it's potentially getting worse right now.
I'm glad you're somewhat enjoying it, though. It seems like you're finding the positives in it. That's like the first stage of this. You're going to hit a really bad rut here probably next week where it's going to get a lot worse.
So what's the worst part? Because I feel like the Waluigi stretch would be really bad, but the loop of Dillon Gabriel touchdown or touchdown Dillon Gabriel, not sure which way you hear it, would also be pretty rough, especially as a noted DG kind of hater.
Yeah, it's certainly not the Waluigi part, because that's just like something that Jameson is just obsessed with. So it's like, I have no connection to that whatsoever. It's just kind of there. And I just think of why is Jameson so obsessed with this every time?
It came out of left field. I didn't even know he was obsessed with
Dillon Gabriel touchdown, because I know it's targeted at me. You can't help but to take it personally. Whereas 90% of it is just things that Jameson likes. It's just like the crazy frog and then the Waluigi. It's just it makes me laugh because I know that he's yes, this is wonderful.
I've always liked Waluigi's sounds, but then I played Mario Party probably the week before that I made this, and it was fresh in my brain. And every time he'd jump up to hit the cube, he'd go, I just loved it.
Oh, incredible. Well, let's get right to it and break down these tiers because there's no time like the present. So, Jameson, give the people a rundown of what exactly we're doing, what the tiers mean, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So for people listening on podcast, not YouTube forum, we have a visual here, and we're on Tier Maker's website. Essentially, it'll go from S, A, B, C, and D. If you are a D, that is the lowest rating that we can give you.
Mm-hmm.
So
stands for
think
DAC.
we think
DAC
very
tier.
lowly. Yeah. Well, there it is. Number one. But that'll be our lowest tier, and then S will be the highest tier. And I'll play a little game with Ty. Since we did the preseason position group, can you name me the two position groups that we thought the lowest of in the preseason in terms of our rankings? Do you remember?
As a consensus?
Yeah, because we went between both of our opinions,
Yeah.
but we didn't really have a tiebreaker. But I don't really remember how it happened. But we had two position groups in the C group. Do you remember what those two were?
I know personally what I thought the lowest position group was. I was peer pressured out of saying. I will have to probably say one of the lines, and then running backs. It certainly should be running backs.
No, we had running backs at a B. We felt very confident with the Javante Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk young core moving forward in the preseason. We had hopes for them. It really soured really fast during the regular season. It was one of the lines. Do you know offense or defense?
It was D-line.
It was no, it
Yeah.
was not D-line. It
No,
was
yeah, it was
offensive
the
line. It was offensive
were
line.
right.
We did not believe in that group
Yeah.
too much. And then wide receivers, they were tied at the C level. We did not think highly of the wide receivers group like at all. We had some bodies, but we didn't really think we had like a star out there. We were talking, remember the big talking point, the preseason, do we really have a WR1 on this team? That was a huge thing we talked about every single week. And then we finally came to the consensus. Drake Stoops, even though he's a slot guy, can be a wide receiver one. You don't have to be an outside kind of guy. And we showed in this offense, the style that we had, it really helped to have a very good route runner that could get open fast.
It was Andrell Anthony until he got hurt, though. Let's be honest, in
Mhm.
terms of deep ball stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, like Drake Stoops, I feel like still for the beginning, like he got hurt a little bit at the beginning of the season, and it kind of took him back for a couple games, but he was getting crazy volume.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Speaking of preseason low rankings, Lord King in the comments there brought up tight ends. I'm sure we'll have an
Well,
interesting discussion about.
I
that
wanted to
later.
put tight ends at the very bottom in the preseason as well, but Ty's always had a very high,
He was enamored with Blake
Austin
Smith.
Stogner. Yes, in the club. Everyone loved
The club man.
from the spring game.
Even though he only had the club in the spring game, he didn't have the
Hey.
club. Maybe that was his problem in the regular season. He
Blake
lost the club.
Smith going to Texas State, anything is possible, baby.
He should double club.
He's
Just-
doing anything he can just to get Jameson's approval.
Okay, and then so our highest ranking position group was safeties. I feel like that's a pretty easy one. But then let's go to like the middle of the season, Bobby. Do you remember our lowest group our lowest two groups in the middle of the season? This one's a lot easier.
Lowest two groups.
And they were both D tier because we did not have a C tier, but we did have a D bottom tier, and these two groups were there.
Well, we don't have a special teams option, so
Yes,
them.
I
We
should
should honestly go ahead and make one now, if you can. Because I think that
I don't even know if I can.
they're just already in the D. That's fine. I'm gonna go with D line. I think at that point. And
Wrong.
I don't. Okay.
Wrong. Yeah, we had them
Wow.
at a B.
Okay.
tier. We had the
Jesus.
defensive line as a B.
That was right
So-
after Texas, though. That was right after Texas. We were really
The
fresh.
date on this was it says streamed 3 months ago. What's the date on this? I don't know. 3 months ago. It was right before the Central Florida game. Whew. Yikes.
Yikes. Yikes. Running backs. We're gonna go running backs.
Was absolutely in the D tier. That is for
Right.
sure. And
So running backs in the D, and then it would have been tight ends, right?
Yes,
Had to have been.
absolutely. We had to get Ty on board just a little bit, but I think now that we had me and you against him, he couldn't get tight ends.
Because I wasn't there for the first one. I was in Florida. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but it did disappoint you, Ty, to have tight ends at the bottom. But I think you finally caved in a little bit after you realized that Austin Stogner volume was
I will
a
say,
little bit low.
statistically, they did clean it up towards the end of the season. They stat padded in garbage time like their dad.
In comparison to what they did to the beginning of the year, I'll give you that.
But we
still
had a lot of
poor.
injuries, as we'll get into. We had a lot of, obviously significant changes on the offense in terms of
Yeah.
early season to late season. Actually, really, really interesting to look at now that I think about it.
And so I will, in these rankings, take into account the injuries, and I will ding them for injuries. And it's not like I'm just going to give them an exception, a free pass for being hurt. I'm still going to ding the wide receivers for Andrell Anthony missing the season.
Okay, so I also want to say this is about 2023. It's not like a pre-2024
Exactly.
thing, right?
Mm,
So
yes.
we're basically not really But that team is drastically different too, though.
That's
Let's
part
be
of it,
honest.
though, but we still have
Okay,
opinions
okay.
of specific players. This isn't like, obviously, if you're talking big picture, right? and you're like, okay, my view of this team, I'm not going to put it into a box what happened in the Alamo Bowl, but position groups and specific players and my opinions of them, absolutely, you should take that into account.
I get that, but also like I feel like the quarterback position's a little tricky because Dylan Gabriel, who was the quarterback, had no part in that 6 interception game.
Well, exactly. So Dylan Gabriel, therefore, he'll have his own ranking, but
It's got to be weighted in a way.
Yeah, we also will weight into the fact that Jackson Arnold, even though we thought he was a stellar backup, like as his team last year, he didn't show up in the biggest moment that he needed to.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's going to be an interesting thing to weigh out, though, because like quarterbacks, we're weighing it how I feel right now. Like I feel differently about it in 24 than I do about it in 23. If I'm looking retroactively, I feel about it one way. If I look at it towards the future, I feel about it a different one. So that's interesting. But you're right. The game was played. It was in 2023. Should count. So anyways.
Oh man, Ty, you hear this? He's already trying to eliminate this. Like it doesn't even count. We had to hold him, like, be completely honest here in this situation.
I mean, I think I feel like when we get to quarterbacks, if we're considering the bowl game, will be interesting. I think Bobby and I will be broadly aligned against you on expectations.
Well, this is all about the 2023 season. So let's go over and let's kind of like recap for everyone listening. I don't have any kind of viewing purposes for this, but for our preseason that Ty and I did, we had no one in our S tier. We did have the safeties as an A. We thought very highly of them in their depth. And then we had a lot of people in the B tier, linebackers, quarterback, D-line, cornerbacks, running backs, tight ends. And then we had wide receivers and offensive line. Then moving into the middle of the season, remember, this is right before the Central Florida game when everything really turned to crap. We had in the S tier 2 position groups, and that would be quarterback and safeties. 2 S. We thought very, very highly of them. This was in the heat of like Dylan Gabriel Heisman talks. Josh Pate also at one point said that Dylan Gabriel would be at the top of what's the exact wording of that, Ty? Do you remember? What did he say?
Anyone's Heisman conversation, or so you know how Pate is.
Dylan Gabriel right now is at the top of my Heisman race.
Speaking of Pate, interesting. The gel man amnesia effect is a very interesting thing to know about. Imagine if you're reading a newspaper and on the first page is something that you know about your professional field, and it's just the worst article you've ever read. And then you're like, wow, this is just a terribly written article. And then you turn to the second page of the same newspaper and it's something you don't know anything about. And then you take that as a truth. Okay. Completely unrelated. Anyways.
Oh, it's crazy how the brain works. So, but like quarterbacks, safeties as an S. In A, we've thought very highly of the team at this. At an A, we had the linebackers, the cornerbacks, and the wide receivers at an A. That was impressive. That's really, really impressive that the wide receivers are at an A. I don't know if that's going to hold. At B, we had defensive line, offensive line. And then at C, nobody was there. But then D, tight ends and running backs. So it's not going to be the same as it was obviously in the middle of the season. So let's just go ahead and tackle it and see where we go. And I think we already kind of were talking about it. I think a fun group to already start with would be the quarterbacks, because we talked about Jackson Arnold and how much we should weigh that game in the Alamo, and recency bias is really strong. But Dylan Gabriel, all jokes aside, I felt like played a really, really good season for what we needed him to do. And it obviously did enough for him to land a pretty big NIL gig at Oregon. So I'm going to put the quarterbacks at an A, because I think Dylan Gabriel wasn't quite S whenever we did it in the middle of the season. I was a little bit shaky on it, if I remember right. But he was still playing very, very good for what we needed to. But Jackson Arnold really disappointed us in our third most important game, I'd say, of the season. So you've got to just do a little bit of a ding. I just don't think that they're S tier anymore, but I would not put them all the way down at B. I think it's an A.
I got to say, one thing I think we got to commend ourselves for on Gabriel and the quarterbacks as a whole is after that Gabriel massive game, we gave him props, don't get us wrong, but we definitely said, this isn't him all the time. This is his best game. He'll have lower games. Where he is somewhere in the middle. And I think that was a very astute way to put that. I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back, but also I am. Because I think he's an A. I think an A is the right place to put it. I don't think Arnold's performance in one exhibition game that really doesn't matter on either side is enough to drag it to a B. But I think overall, Gabriel, most of all, wasn't, I thought he did really, really well throughout the season. Not obviously consistently hitting the highs of Texas, but consistently being a solid, great quarterback. Yes. I think there'll be moments next year where we really do miss him. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am in agreement with y'all. I think
wow.
I think A-, but still an A. And I think I would, if we really dove into the Jackson Arnold thing, I think I would be maybe the highest one on this podcast. I almost going out there what we needed from him in that Alamo Bowl. And again, this is going forward, but went out there, made mistakes. It does not really statistically get any worse than the game that he had. And, it might be helpful to go out there and get punched in the mouth the first time that he was a true starter in a game and be able to take that forward and really develop. I blame that game more on coaching in terms of his development. This is not a Venables bit. But I would blame that game a little bit more on coaching and overall strategy, and just having someone that was not prepared to be in the position that he was put in. Obviously, you can't help that sometimes, but I don't really hate the Alamo Bowl in terms of Jackson Arnold in retrospect, especially when if I were to blame one person for us losing as a player, it would be Farouk, who should be fined at least, for his scholarship back, if not imprisoned. So,
oh my God.
Well, he got probably a little bit of an NIL deal to come back, which is quite the opposite.
Oh my God. That's funny. Look, I'll say this as well. I think this might be a little copium. I don't know. I think I know, great way to introduce a sentence. Look, I think maybe one of the best things for his development was to have a crap game, get it out of the way, and have an entire offseason to work on what he can fix.
Oh, yes. Coach, speak it into existence, Bobby.
But it's true. It's true. I mean, look, the game doesn't matter in the end. I mean, if we won the Alamo Bowl, we'd forget about it already. The folks in Arizona already don't care because their program's been decimated because Fish left. And
also basketball season started, so it's like
I like that too. I like my quarterbacks and my players to be a bit hungry. I like a little bit of adversity that you have to work with. I like that he has to have that stuck in his craw all off season.
I disagree with that. I don't want a quarterback with any kind of thing on their brain. I don't want them seeing ghosts like Sam Darnold was, in the secondary. I don't think a guy going out there and throwing that many interceptions that he did in that kind of performance will be a positive for him. It could be a neutral. He could be like, I got over it, but I'm going to keep doing me. I don't see many positives from it, to tell you the truth, Bobby.
Well, it depends on what type of guy you are. If you're someone who lets that anxiety and that stress, take over your mindset, then yeah, that's not good. But if it's something you can learn from and improve from, then that's another thing.
Yeah, it's not like he was going out. There's some learning opportunity. I think that the negatives may outweigh the positives in that situation. But that's like a whole. We already said that we weren't going to really talk too much about Jackson in this situation, and I get it. It's kind of a wash. And from what I get from his competitive attitude, I think that it won't phase him, and it won't be seeing ghosts like Sam Darnold. I think he'll be just fine.
Yeah, and ultimately we don't know the guy. It's not. We are very much a fan podcast. We're not out there, on the beat talking to these guys. We don't really know. We're not in that locker room, so we're just making educated guesses. But you're right. I think that's enough for the quarterback. Yeah,
I think Ty, you already talked about Jalil Farouk a little bit. So do you want to start off with the wide receivers group?
Yeah, we might as well.
All right, tell me what you think. Where are you going to put them?
I think as a group, and again, we're looking at the season as a whole. Obviously, the quarterbacks, we went on a sort of dove into a little niche thing, but I think season as a whole, if I'm factoring in especially our preseason expectations, I have to lean. I mean, this might be one I think where we have a deciding vote that might split. I'm going to go ahead and throw my lot in rose colored glasses. I'm going to have to go and throw my lot in with an A. I think it's a tale of two seasons, certainly, pre Red River and Red River, and then everything after that. But again, you're going to factor in injuries. I'm all for that. But I think in retrospect, we saw this receiver room especially start with no clear definitive leader, no clear sort of really structure, if that's the appropriate term. We saw that develop. We saw a really good rhythm develop with Anthony, with Stoops, and how everything meshed there. And then we saw it evolve when they had challenges thrown their way, like Anthony, new guys coming up, especially towards the end of the season. We saw Nick Anderson really start to emerge and create something. Obviously, he had his mistakes that I'm very excited for in the future. And then we saw some touchdowns, from some lesser known guys that were able to get bigger, explosive routes here and there as well. So I have to say, in retrospect, I am very comfortable giving the receiver room not a high A, but an A in terms of my vote for their ranking. Farouk specifically, again, this has nothing to do with him. He did not contribute at all. He's probably the deciding factor between them being an S tier. Farouk and Gavin Freeman, if you want to count him, I
was about to say, you've got a vendetta versus multiple wide receivers. You're giving them an A?
God forbid I use performance on the field to rank the receivers.
Well, and my thing is, I have them in a B. Just frankly, if we're talking front to bottom, there are successful moments. There are high points. Andrew Anthony looked very impressive in the first half of the year. Drake Stoops, obviously, such an impactful player all around. But it was just kind of, and then of course, like Ty said, Nick Anderson was excellent. It was just kind of inconsistent throughout the season. Granted, it was a position group that we weren't very high on because it was pretty young, pretty, experimental. But I think Emmett Jones did a really good job of getting it together. And look, I'm optimistic for the future, but interested to see what happens with this next round of off-season stuff, portal, etc. To see if anything happens. And of course, Andrew Anthony comes back off of that injury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think an A is warranted, Ty. To be honest with you, I was in between B and C with this position group, and I know that we had them at A in the midseason, but I feel like a lot of things really kind of changed, and we started to see the ugly side as the season started to carry on. But it's a B for me. I think C is just being a little bit too pessimistic. I agree with Bobby. We can't, forget about Andrew Anthony coming back. I understand ACL. I believe ACL, right? And him coming back, you hope that he's at like a similar, kind of productivity. But we had expectations to try to find a wide receiver one on the outside. We didn't find that this season definitively, and then you've got to ding them for that. But we got some really good development throughout the season from Nick Anderson, to where that is a guy I feel super confident moving into the next season. And also Jaden Gibson was a guy that we almost were ready to throw into the trash in terms of like his hands and his dropping and all of that stuff. And he seemed to be a kind of guy that really showed some good moments. So obviously with Drake Stoops being an A to S kind of guy for our team, and Jalil Farouk kind of bringing it down, I think it's a B for me, right in the middle.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with deciding on a B as a group.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Bobby, what do you got? We got two offensive. You want to stay on the offense side? Do you want to go to defense? What do you want to do here? I'll let you choose.
Let's flip sides on this one. Let's go with the D line.
Great. This is my favorite one. Go for it.
This is a fun one. This is a spicy one. The D line's interesting because it had moments, Texas, Ethan Downs, marvelous performance, but it also had moments where it caused the defense to completely collapse with their lack of pressure. A lot of issues we saw that we saw last year kind of reared their head this year as well. I mean, I'm going with like a high C is my thought on the D line. I don't think they were bad. You know, there are moments where they're closer to a B, but ultimately, personnel wise, they just weren't quite there. And for a Venables defense that relies so much on pressure and getting to the quarterback, it didn't cut it. And because of that, I'm going with a C.
Yeah, interior was like solid. They're okay. You know, they did what they needed to do. There's obviously some great moments throughout the season in terms of them plugging the holes to allow Danny Stutzman, Jaron Kanik, you know, to come down and make those great, you know, goal line stops. That was so crucial for our defense. But huge but, like Bobby said, is the pressure was absolutely embarrassing. At the beginning of the season, we gave it a pass. We gave them a B in our midseason grade because, like, we think it can get a little bit better. We've still seen some decent things from them, but we're just hoping for more pressure from the outside. We still didn't get that. At the worst part in Oklahoma's season this year, we didn't have, like, you know, during our stretch of losses this year, we didn't have a single sack from a defensive lineman. None. That is unacceptable. So that is a C for me. That is not a high C. That is a middle C for me. I will not give them a D because the interior still proved to me that they did good at doing their job. They weren't dominant, but they were formidable. But the edges, they were not good. Not good. So it's a C.
Yeah, I like the idea of a low C. Jameson, you kind of touched on it. You know, the interior obviously performed well enough. It's almost, you know, to use the analogy that I think we use 4 or 5 times an episode on this pod, is they were just a little Dutch boy with their finger in the dike. And
of course,
yeah, they did what they needed to do to prevent, you know, the dike from collapsing, but also the dike never got fixed. The little Dutch boy is still there with his finger in it. So he's getting rather tired of this dike not getting fixed and generating sacks. So yeah, I like C tier.
You could just say damn, right? Like,
no, because
anyways.
no, they
okay,
are different
no.
things. They are different.
They are different. They are different. I apologize. But
this is not
look,
a bit to try to say edgy
no,
words.
I know.
Correct.
No, you're right, Ty. That is very much the Dutch
sacks.
No, that is very much the Dutch folklore of it is a thing. You're right. I will say though, Jameson, I think this is a position that like has the biggest potential to make a massive jump next year. And maybe that's just because I'm way too optimistic in freshmen like David Stone. But, you know, this recruiting class, if it stays intact, I feel like can really take this up a couple notches.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite A, but like a high B if we're feeling really good.
I wouldn't note on David Stone being the huge, you know, game changer. He might go out there and make some plays where it's like, oh, wow, man, I really am excited for this kind of guy. I don't think he'll be the guy to like change your complete opinion to where this is the highest ceiling. I think really what it lies in is like PJ. If we can get PJ Adebawore out there, that's the guy that you got to talk about because he didn't get nearly enough run near the end of the season. And now there should be a spot for him to take starting next year if he does what he's supposed to this offseason. You'll have Ethan Downs on one side. My opinions on Ethan Downs are one thing, but, you know, having an Oklahoma guy with the passion that he has, the leadership that he has, I understand his pass rush isn't the best, but it's still, he's did some decent things for us. PJ can be the guy that we thought he is, you know, that'll be the guy that can unlock, you know, the potential of this this group next year.
And that's the thing about PJ is there were so many times where he was just like this close to making a big sack or a big play, and the quarterback just got it out of his hand, that sort of thing. Like PJ, I feel like is way closer to being a massive game-changing player than people think. So I'm with you, Jameson.
Yeah, him and R. Mason Thomas. I mean, we've been saying this about R. Mason Thomas, but it's been hard for him to stay healthy. But we really, really need them to be big for us next year. But we've said this for the past 2 years in terms of our pass rush, and it's continued to be a problem. So once again, we will talk about it throughout the whole off season, and we'll say it in the preseason again. Pass rush is so important. But I'll go up next, take a new position group, and I'm kind of going with these great. What do you got, Ty? Tell me.
I had one quick programming note. Sorry. Hans Brinker, the little Dutch boy from the story. That's in fact an American story, and the author never even went to the Netherlands until after the book was very
What?
successful, and then she had the money to go. Yes. Yeah,
Oh my
look
God.
it up. It was just
That's-
written by some American lady who was like, "This sounds like a very Dutch story,"
Oh my
which is
God.
amazing.
That's like how the founders of Outback Steakhouse, one, hadn't been to Australia before they started Outback, and two, haven't been there since. They just watched Crocodile Dundee and decided to make a restaurant chain after it. So look at us Americans, just doing great cultural things.
Man, we're
Anyways,
so Jeez.
incredible.
Let's keep it up with kind of our smooth transitions, because I brought up linebackers. So let's talk about linebackers here. And I feel like this is a really, really hard group to talk about. Really difficult, because you talk, and we stated that we're going to talk about Dasan McCullough in the cheetah position, and this is correct. That's what we did in the preseason, in the midseason. But
yeah,
to be honest with you, the way they ended the season, they're more like a safety or a cornerback, because you saw a lot of Kendall Dolby. So let's just go ahead and still put him in this category. But it was kind of it's not as clear as it was in the middle of the season of what they were.
We'll reevaluate in spring if we want to keep him there.
Yeah. But it's like, obviously, with what McCullough was showing this year, he showed a lot of weakness in terms of coverage, and which allowed Kendall Dolby to go out there and be one of the most unsung heroes of this football team. I love the way he played, but it showed you how much that this team really hoped to have Justin Harrington be that kind of guy, and we are missing him a lot. Still unlocked Kendall Dolby, but I think the way that this defense is set up for that kind of, we saw it in, what was it, the Jack was the rush or whatever it was in Alex Grinch's defense. There's a lot of different kind of defenses that have the type of guys, and they're supposed to be playmakers. They're supposed to look good. They're supposed to go out there and be a star, because they have so much, they don't really have too much integrity to a certain zone. So I think, they should look better. And Dasan McCullough not looking better is concerning, and you got to take into account that in terms of grading the linebackers. But let's kind of focus more on, I know this is very long-winded, focus more on the inside, because Danny Stutzman at the beginning of the season, obviously an S. The way that the linebackers are playing, no doubt S. Absolutely stellar. Danny Stutzman was hurt at the end of the season. He could not stay healthy, and he looked like he was in pain whenever he was playing. He was not quite it. And you have to take that into account. And then also, Jaren Kanak at the end of the season, did he really do much for us in terms of positivity? I think he really took a dip that we were hoping that he could be a guy where it'd be him really like the next Danny Stutzman. I feel like we really lost a lot from him there. And that also takes into account my grade of their team. With all that said, and taking into account the depth of the position group, I still think the linebackers are an A from what they showed at the beginning of the season, how special they were. Like, Danny Stutzman coming back, and what he showed, this guy could be the best inside linebacker in the country. So I'm not ready to put him at an S because of what they showed near the end of the season, but still really, really impressive stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you, because like peak Danny Stutzman was incredible. Kanak had a couple moments, but ultimately wasn't that great. And Kip Lewis, during that little stretch there, filling in for Stutzman in Kansas and Oklahoma State, really helped things out when they got pretty bad. But as a unit, they fell off against TCU, and they had their moments of not looking like that A tier unit.
Oh, they were not that near the end of the season. They were a C probably those last couple games.
Yeah, like they had some poor moments. I'm tempted to put them at a B, but I'm gonna go with an A, just because I feel like at their height, at the best of the best, they were really, really good. And I will say, as a unit, I'm trying not to let 2024 influence it, but in terms of the talent we have coming back for next year, I'm really optimistic and really excited about that unit. So ultimately, I'm landing on an A.
Yeah, when it comes to the linebackers, I think there's two really important considerations that I think about. One is obviously Danny Stutzman. You can point to his absence as a big factor in both the regular season losses for sure. Obviously, there was a whole bunch of other stuff that went wrong in those that we broke down in our post game pods. But I think without him, you look at this team or this linebacker group, and it's a very different group. But you can't just say, oh, exclude him. He's a piece of it. He's part of the team. So he's a big factor, has to be acknowledged. But I think he does skew the evaluation a little bit because he's such an extreme data point towards the positive. I think inverse to that, you have to factor in the D line. I mean, I think I really look at that as a consideration. I look at, as much as I look at the O line and the running backs sort of as they interplay with each other, as we'll get into shortly. But I think, if we're putting the D line down at C tier, and we're especially highlighting things like their inability to generate really any pressure whatsoever on their own, that you have to factor that into the linebackers. Linebackers had to cover down on some things that if we even had a solid B tier D line, they wouldn't necessarily have to. So they were definitely task saturated at certain points. And I think you started to see that, just the tax of the season on them towards the end of the season. So I'm pretty comfortable in saying that I believe that the linebacker group, with all the considerations, everything you guys dove into, and I think the linebackers are one we could talk about for a whole podcast, but I like him in the A tier.
Okay. We haven't had too much disagreement thus far. Ty, you're up. What do you want? We got tight ends, offensive line, cornerbacks, safeties, and running backs.
I mean, I don't know that we're going to have that much disagreement throughout the pod. I would like to maybe, I don't know, let me see. We're sort of 2 offense, 2 defense. Let's
we got three offense, 2 defense.
That doesn't make sense. We've done 4 groups.
Oh, I'm talking about remaining. Sorry.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. We'll just do the backs. We'll jump into the running backs. I think that'll segue.
Good.
Yeah, let's do running backs. And
this is a fun one.
Let's maybe tee up O-line right after that because they flow into each other.
I'm with that.
What do you?
So running backs, we don't have an F tier. We don't have an F tier, so D.
Here's my thing. I think the back half justifies a C to me. I feel like what Gavin Sawchuk was able to do on the back end, what Tawi Walker was able to do at times, I think it's enough to salvage it from being in that D position, the last of the last. I felt encouraged enough by that back half to not call him D, but like just barely, like a C minus. They were flunking at one point, but they got their stuff together and scraped out a C. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, Bobby, I agree. They were like bottom of D for the majority of the season. And Gavin Sawchuk really tried to ace the final exam. He got like probably, like an 80% on the final exam. Not a C, but you got a B on it. And good thing that the final exam was worth a little bit more, that I think it bumped him up to a C. But damn, I'm really close to still wanting to give them a D, because the beginning of the season, it's crazy. You think about it, right? The beginning of the season is whenever OU fans were happy and we had high, thoughts. We were talking about Big 12 championships, and dare we say it, we were thinking about playoffs, and our running backs were pitiful, absolutely pitiful. And we were still performing at a high level despite that. And then as the season went kind of to shit, we still kind of got this, phoenix from the ashes of Gavin Sawchuk, this guy that we needed so much. It wasn't enough, but man, did it make you feel better about this position group as a whole just because of one guy. And Tawi Walker, he showed some things, but still, he still wasn't the guy. And obviously had the kind of disagreement within the locker room and kind of the suspension, not suspension situation that he had. All that to say, I think I've got to give him a C. I can't give the way Gavin Sawchuk played at the beginning of the year still a D. I think this is a 70% even. Maybe, can I give him a 69.5 and round them up? That's really what it is.
They got the miracle roundup on the last day, just like refreshing. They were refreshing canvas on the last day, trying to see if it got bumped up, and they got the bump.
Hey, Ty, if Gavin Sawchuk came to you during office hours after his final exam performance, would you round him up to a C just after everything?
If he were a student athlete?
Yeah, he came out. He's like, "Hey, I had a really bad beginning of the year, but there were some
if one of
factors that went
if
into
one
it."
of like his representatives came or something like that. No, I will say, joking aside, the running backs, I think probably are C tier. This is a whole bit, O line. We've tabled that for a second, but I am convinced to this day, right? No one has any evidence to contradict this. I don't have evidence to prove it necessarily, but no one can disprove this. I still think that Jeff Levy does not understand how to actually effectively employ running backs because it took us forever to figure out just who we should be giving the snaps to. That was a big, talking point, and it's really difficult to
Well,
evaluate this.
We
Running
haven't
his
even,
fault, though?
we haven't even
Because-
said the name of our RB1, like Marcus Major. For most of the year,
But-
we were
but
running
he
Marcus
wasn't.
Major.
That's what I'm
forced to be
saying.
Marcus Major and RB1 because Javonte Barnes and Sawchuk weren't healthy, the guys that we thought we were going to have. And then we had to rely on a walk-on to be RB1 for a little bit too. Like
If
it was
If anything, we
How
should
much
be giving them
is
a
that?
curve. Like, this should be a solid scene. I forgot that they were hurt. Yeah, I feel really good about putting them in
no,
C.
no, we're not,
No.
we're not curving. You gotta
Jameson
take into
down
account
curved.
injuries.
Jameson down curved the receivers for getting injured. So
Yeah, you take that into account. Like the
I still think it's a
Sawchuk
C,
and
though.
Sawchuk and Barnes being hurt at the beginning of the year is a negative, not a positive.
Yeah.
We should
I-
not
actually-
say, "Oh, give them a free pass."
We'll
for that.
still call
Jameson's
it a,
right.
We'll
It's-
call it a 70, though. I think a 70 is
it's
about
their
right.
job.
69
It's their
and a
job to
half.
be durable. I reaffirm my dissenting vote. They should be D tier. It's their job to not get hurt. So
Well,
I'm not gonna lie. I've thought about moving them down to D just throughout this conversation because it's just like they were bad for such
No.
a strong part of it. And Sawchuk had some here's the thing, a lot of his big games, he had some big plays, which we really need because we really didn't have many big plays at the end of the year. But still, like his averages were a little bit skewed in terms of the big plays. So
I think
the-
he's still a C, though. I think he's still a C.
but he's a C. But the whole rest of the season was like
I thought
the
Tawee Walker
lowest-
was good, though.
Tawee
like,
Walker
Tawee
showed some
Walker-
good things.
Yeah. Tawee
But-
Walker
but
had
it-
really, like Tawee, like we obviously don't talk about the positives in the Kansas game because we lost it. But Tawee Walker was the reason we were like really competitive in that one.
Yeah, but the big picture of this season, though, which really sucks, is how quickly we threw Javonte Barnes.
That's not what that is not a quality loss, Ty. No. No. You put it on the bottom, and we know you're the one who hit that
You
one.
are right on the cusp of a quality loss segment there.
No. I was saying I was saying he had a good performance in a bad game. Is that not true?
No, because we lost.
But that doesn't mean that nobody played well. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, Kansas played well.
It was a game we should have won, but it doesn't mean
Yes.
that everybody was bad.
Yeah,
That's,
Yeah, no, I
it's a team sport.
I'm in agreement. Yes,
But-
which is
Okay.
Brian
But-
Kelly segment right there.
yeah. Final
Okay.
thing, it just really sucks not having Javonte Barnes as a guy you think is going to be your future running back. We thought so highly of him in the preseason. The athleticism numbers, 40+ inch vertical, great speed and power, and he just doesn't have the vision, and it's just a shame. It's really a shame, and that sucks. That's a big part of my grade wanting to give a D, just because I was so excited for this running back room in the preseason. I really was, because we talked about them having a high ceiling. This could be the 1-2 punch. Javonte Barnes, would destroy you with his athleticism and power, and then you could get Gavin Sawchuk with a change of pace, and that just is not the case. It really sucks.
We thought it was going to be Mixon P. Ryan too. But
I wouldn't have said that, but we wanted something like that. We wanted the great value mac and cheese, but we didn't get it.
hey, Jameson, as you and I have talked about several times on this podcast, the great value mac and cheese, the Gouda, incredible.
Yep, it's the GOAT.
It's the best mac and cheese on the. It's the best boxed mac and cheese on the market.
There's no doubt about it. I don't
free
listen
ads.
to it. I don't listen to you if you're a Kraft powdered cheese kind of guy.
No free ads, but great value. Gouda mac is the best by far.
Yeah.
Offensive
One
line,
thing
Bobby,
to
or
remember-
Yeah.
Okay, you got it.
Oh, go ahead, Ty.
I was just gonna say on the backs. I mean, we should have known, right? Like our leading guy is from Colorado, and then we had two guys from Nevada, all ball not nowhere states. So I don't know necessarily again why we're recruiting outside of California, Florida, Texas, and Oklahoma. Beyond me, but we thought they'd be good. Guy from
Marcus
Nevada
Majors from
playing
Oklahoma.
football. Yeah. Well, was he the top one in Oklahoma? No. So
Marcus
I rest
Major
my
running
case.
that flat coin. Just still hilarious to me. Still so funny. No, let's talk about the O-line. And this is why I think next year we should have this conversation before the bowl, because I look at the O-line so much worse because of the departures. Losing Caden Green, it's hard to think about this team now because we're all looking towards the future where we don't know what's going to happen. We lost a lot of guys due to just eligibility running out, the NFL draft, Drinkowitz, tinkering in the background, whatever the hell he's doing. That it's hard to be optimistic about this, and ultimately, it feels like I'm going to go as far as calling it a really high C at its best. I feel like Walter Rouse was great, but he's gone. I thought Rain was solid, but he's gone. Caden Green showed a lot of progress or promise, but he's gone too. And for me, it's really hard to let what happened, in the offseason reflect this. Because even like McCade Matower, my optimism is low. But performance-wise, it's a B C to me. So I'm trending C, but I'm going to actively admit that I feel like a lot of my negativity about it kind of comes from where I'm looking at the roster and the unit going forward. And that's
which is
kinda
not
hard for
part
me.
of this exercise.
I know it's not. So but I also feel like they weren't that great. So I'm going to go C. I'm going to go C.
What do you think, Ty?
I guess I like C. I'm seeing. I could see B. I mean, I think they were B at a lot of points, and I was higher on the line. Certain I think mid-season one, I was trying to give them an A, and y'all were giving me some pushback. I think there is something to be said about O-lines in terms of Oklahoma fans' perspectives. I think it's often overlooked and skewed a little bit, but I think you can look at O-lines not to the level that we've had in terms of quarterbacks that skew in OU fans' perspective, especially of sort of our age group at 20s, 30s. It's kind of all you've known your conscious life or maybe even your entire life, is that we have quarterbacks who are at the Heisman ceremony, basically by default, going back to 24, 25 years ago to now. So I think O-line, much less than quarterbacks, but we've been very spoiled, I think, in the long run, and that does skew things. I think if you were to look at this line, on the scale of college football, when you had to rank every O-line in D1 football, S through D tier, I think you maybe find OU landing more into the Bs, but I guess I'm comfortable with Cs. Again, looking at this season in retrospect, and I think some rose-colored glasses as well.
Yeah, it's a C, and it was not good because our run game, like you mentioned, Ty, and during this episode, you cannot talk about the running backs and offensive line without talking about them together. The offensive line did not do any justice of creating enough holes for our running backs to go out there and succeed. At the end of the year, they started to do some things, and obviously did Marcus Major and Javonte Barnes at the beginning of the season do the best job at finding those holes? No, that's never been really their strength. But the run grade, that's a D. The way that they run blocked was not there. And then kind of dissecting the offensive line, the way that we played, Caden Green was a great, great story. Oh my gosh. He played so great as a true freshman, getting pegged in at guard. Like he was like probably the best freshman offensive lineman, second best offensive lineman behind like Caden Proctor, in the college football sphere. It's really hard not to take that into account. Obviously, Bobby, throw away all of the stuff of him going to Missouri just about this season. Walter Rouse had his ups, he had his downs. Was he healthy? We don't know, but he wasn't always solid. Don't even talk to me about Savion Byrd. That was an absolute disaster. That's a D. That was absolutely embarrassing. That was one of our few great guys in this recruiting class of Bill Beatonbow of offensive line. That it's another strikeout. We talk about Bill Beatonbow's recruiting in terms of big name guys that he's actually gotten to get here, like Bray Walker, strikeout. Savion Byrd, strikeout. A lot of our highly ranked guys have not been the guys to go out and succeed. That sucked. Losing Savion Byrd really, really sucked for us. And he was maybe just not a good offensive lineman to begin with. So, oh well. Senator Andrew Rame had some good moments, like you said, Bobby, but he also snapped the ball at random times, and that sucked. So got to take that into account. McCabe Batallier just was there, and then, Tyler Guyton did good things, but made a lot of penalties. It's a low C for me. I don't think it's a BC. I think it is a straight up C.
Cool. Adam. So we're in consensus there, adding a line to C. I guess it's you. Yeah, Jameson, you're up next with your next position. Who should we go next?
Ty, let's talk about tight ends, and I'm not going to even say anything. D. Don't even talk to me. I don't even want to hear about the ending of your season.
D is you cannot say as a group, right? I wasn't going to do a bit on this, but you cannot say as a group that tight ends were our worst. Like tight end already a very inconsequential position if we're being honest. You cannot say that the running back room and the offensive line were better than the tight ends.
Yes,
they
were.
Can.
We played the tight end group almost every single snap
absurd.
this year, and it feels like they're a wasted position.
The tight end group
because of
useless.
our coach, that's 100%.
Take that into account.
The tight ends are not calling the plays, and they're not going through the evolution.
Getting the ball.
They're not
getting the ball because they're ass.
We had a quarterback who we praised all season for looking at more than one receiver for the first time in his 9-year career. You cannot expect the tight ends to get targets outside of design tight end targets.
Braden Willis did fine last year.
That dude got drafted.
I'm going to pull up those stats actually, because I don't know that his stats are anywhere off of what Stogner's are this year. So if you guys can fill in the blank just for a second.
Yeah, go for it.
Surely not. Surely not. No, it's a D. And I think that's a personnel thing. We knew it was an issue entering the season. It turned out to be an issue. I think any
Braden Willis had 7 touchdowns in 2022. Sorry, just carry on.
Any optimism about the tight end room just comes from the fact that, oh no, they're better than being worse than we thought. They're not an F. And
there's no option for an F, Bobby.
There's no option for an F, but if there was, they wouldn't be an F. I think they'd be a D. It's like my expectations for them were so low that it's a D, but it's not a C. It's just a D. That's just what they were.
You got anything?
And that's fine.
Are the numbers not really speaking?
I will say no. It was taking a second to find them. I will say Braden Willis had a lot more targets and is pretty average
because he was good,
on par with Stogner, because he was the first look on plays.
I will again how much they thought
whatever
of him,
dissenting vote.
Yes.
Rank. Okay. Yes, we're gonna. I thought I must have forgotten that Jeff Levy is in fact the genius in everything he says. Sometimes he doesn't say what he should say, but everything he says is apparently to be taken as gospel. So.
All right.
Dissenting vote, but
what would you have given them if it was just
a C? Just a C.
Okay.
The running back room you can point to, in the offensive line you can point to as a reason for this season being so disappointing. If we're going to factor losing people to transfers and losing people to injuries, you cannot say that the offensive line is almost like they lost us the Alamo Bowl. If you want to point to one position group, I understand, Jackson Arnold, maybe there's an argument. Well, there's a pretty big argument to be made there, but I don't know that I can say that the tight end group as a group ever lost us a game versus other position groups. I can point to that group and say they lost us games.
To me, it's like saying that the tight end group wasn't that bad because they weren't called upon. Feels very similar to be like, oh yeah, I would have made it pro if I didn't blow out my knee. It's like, you know what I mean? The tight end group didn't exist because they weren't good. They didn't have production because they were not good. So
I don't, yeah, but again, like you're saying that our coaching staff is just geniuses at judging who's going to produce, and
I
then
don't think
also
that's
we send out Gavin Freeman every kick to just do whatever it is that he does. It's not produce, so I don't know, that I can point to the tight end group as a bad thing. I'm fine. Like again, dissenting vote, we can move on from it, but
okay.
Well,
we're not going to reach a consensus. You're not going to get me to agree that they're D tier.
That's fine. You don't have to agree with that.
I'll agree that the tight ends are D tier if the running backs are also D tier. But
I thought about it. I really did. But I think it'd be a disgrace to put the tight ends at the same level as the running backs. But that's what we did in the midseason.
Well, yes, because the tight ends didn't lose us any games. And I've had class with one of them. He never forgot to register for classes, unlike our RB1, which again is just, I cannot comprehend how that's possible as a scholarship football player, because I don't even think you do that yourself. So I'm not even sure if we should blame him for that.
Those, some random, like, I don't know, random Alpha Chi screwed up and didn't register him. It's not Marcus Majors' fault.
Submit Marcus Majors.
It's some random Alpha Phi named like Michaela or something.
But then he did also then fail a different semester. So
regardless, he's earning Fleckcoin now.
I think it was not just a error of why he wasn't in classes. I think that's quite obvious.
Right.
What do you want? Yes, a strategic error.
Corners or safeties?
Error.
Unspecified injury will be missing. God, it's like Kansas's quarterback whenever they play a ranked opponent. He's just magically injured.
Coach's decision did not enroll.
Let's roll into
DNR.
I say we save the safeties for last.
D&E.
Since we've been
did not resuscitate Bobby.
That's Major's career, to be fair. Wisconsin must not, or Minnesota must not have read that wristband he has on, but I think save safeties for last because we were so high on them all year. I think that'd be a good way to cap it off. Let's roll into the corners. That is possessive for some reason. All of these are possessive. If you're watching that video,
I know.
Jameson does not have an English degree.
I know. We talked about this in the beginning of the year, and I'm not going to go back. I legitimately graphic design is not my passion.
10-second fix that we noticed months ago.
I typed these in Times New Roman in red font and made tiny little screenshots on Microsoft Word for each position group thing.
That's 1,000% not Times New Roman.
Okay, well then it might be Arial. I don't know. I don't remember what it was.
That is absolutely Arial. That is a non-serif font. It is very much Arial.
Whatever it was, it's generic font. Excuse me.
Regardless, quarterbacks.
Ty, what you got here? Tell me about Woody Washington and your thoughts.
Hey, you've been high on Woody Washington. Is this my chance to get
this
revenge?
Is your chance.
Here's the thing, right? The safeties, ideally, they're like seat belts where we had to use them a lot, right? They're gonna fail sometimes. I don't necessarily know the failure rate of seat belts. We're not gonna get sued, speculating on something like that. For sure. Although if a brand were to sponsor us, we would be willing to say that maybe a competition brand has inferior seatbelts.
I'm down.
Of the manner, but I don't know. I feel like I don't know. Just off the top of my head, you guys have got me in a bad mood, so I want to throw them at least in a C. But I feel like with this group, I'll throw them and it'll just go over their head and someone else will score. So I don't know. I'm gonna abstain.
Okay.
Abstain? Okay.
That is totally okay.
No, I'll give him a B tier. Realistically, I think in retrospect, factoring in the rest of the defense that we've now broken down, and then factoring in our preseason expectations, I don't know that I look at this cornerback room looking at the season as a whole and really have a whole lot that I want to pick at them for. But I also don't have a whole lot, like the linebackers, for example, that I can point to and say, this was such a game, from the entire team. And obviously they had their game. So I think a B tier. I mean, putting him with the receivers, I think is a bit odd. Obviously, very different stories to get there. I think the receivers sort of roller coastered their way into a B, whereas the cornerbacks, I want to say, kind of snuck themselves in unnoticed, at least on my end.
Let us not forget that before UCF, that we had the cornerbacks at an A. Let us not forget that.
Yeah.
We thought very highly of them.
We had most of the team at an A.
I think exactly. I think that we cannot talk about the cornerbacks unless we talk about the beginning of the season, because that's whenever we'll have all of our talking points. Gentry Williams, the way he was playing at the beginning of the season, was something we were really excited about. We had Woody Washington as a cover corner that was going out there and doing his job, and he was being quiet. We always say that he was very quiet, and we loved it. Gentry Williams, sometimes, I've always said this, Ty, sometimes being the CB2, sometimes better than being the CB1.
No,
no,
it's not. No, that does not work for quarterbacks at all. That's not how that works.
More people throw to him gives him more opportunities to go out there and make plays.
That's entirely quarterback dependent.
I know. I'm obviously just messing with you. But he made a lot of plays, wasn't able to stay healthy in the way that he played at the beginning. I mean, at the end of the year, obviously, we didn't have any consistency because we didn't see him too much. You got to dock him for that. Woody Washington, he was decent, and he kind of went a little bit below decent. That's fine. That's totally fine. I think he had an okay year. I will put them in as a whole position group, because obviously we had some other guys beyond those two. Like Kenai Walker played decently at the end of the year. Kendall Dolby even played a little bit at cornerback too throughout all of this, which I am a huge fan of Kendall Dolby. I'll give him a B. That's fine. They're not anywhere close to an A, but I can't throw them at a C, because like defensive line has clear faults. I was like, they're clear faults. Running backs, clear faults. Offensive line, clear faults. Cornerback, yeah, they were disappointing, but like, am I gonna go pick them apart? Not really.
And I feel like a lot of why they struggled was because of scheme, and because of the defensive line.
Yeah,
pass rush failing. So I can't blame it. I can't blame them specifically for it. I think they're a B. They weren't like spectacular or overwhelmingly great. I thought they were solid given what they were dealing with, their role in the defense. They were okay. Gentry, this is a different ranking, I think, if Gentry Williams is healthy. But given that we're dealing with the reality here, they're a B.
If Gentry Williams played like he did at the beginning of the season, throughout the whole season, he'd be an A, and there's no doubt. That's why that we gave them an A before UCF, but he dropped off like ridiculously
because he couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah, which is such a shame. So hopefully next season changes.
I do have to say, I did do a quick evaluation criteria. I pulled up our text and just searched Woody. Because that's how I can tell if there's been a positive or a negative, and I have
there's a lot of negative.
4 different games where he was just absolutely getting cooked, including one text where I said, well, if it isn't Jameson's boy Woody getting cooked for the 5th week in a row. So that's not surprising. But
is that a C? Is that a C?
I'm going to change my vote. I don't think it changed the ranking, but I am going to change my vote to a C tier. Not because of that, but because of something y'all said. You mentioned that they were hurt a little bit by the scheme, which, because we use consistent grading criteria, as we've established with the tight ends, is their own fault for not being good enough to get a better scheme. So, once again, it's simple. Why don't you just buy a house? Why don't the cornerbacks just get a better scheme? So I will give them C tier.
I could hear the argument for them at a C. I'm not gonna lie.
I get it. I think overall it's not all on them, if that makes sense. Regardless, I think they're a B.
Yeah.
Right. Safeties.
Safeties, hit it, Bobby.
It's got to be. I'm thinking an A, if not an S. I'm gonna go with the A though. They were remarkable. Billy Bowman was fantastic, of course. Peyton Bowen at times just like exuded star potential. Was incredibly exciting across the field. He wasn't just primarily a safety, but that is one of our strongest units by far. I don't think they did enough to quite get that S tier, but I think they were pretty remarkable. So I'm going to put him at an A.
Yeah, I think I think we may have brought this up in the midseason one, but at some point we discussed maybe S tier is realistically where you're looking at these individuals or these position groups are in the contention for national awards or things of that matter, right? Is that something that we did discuss, or was that it? Okay, yeah. So
yeah, that was a big thing because we talked about it with the quarterback with Dylan Gabriel. Even though we had our faults, this dude was in the like some people had him at the top of the Heisman group. So how could we?
I don't know about the top. Yeah, but he was very realistically. He was very realistically. Yeah. No, well, I meant like I don't know if I even then I don't think we agreed with that. Like Bobby said, we had a more nuanced take.
You can't ignore it. But the way that
he was very rightfully in the discussion at that. If you had voted on it at that time, he would have deservingly been at least in the ceremony. I think with that criteria in mind, with the season in mind, I also have to vote A tier for the safeties. They were not, national award winning, but I think, if you want to look at, were they a top 3 position group on this team? I'm very comfortable with that. I don't think there's any reason to put them below. I mean, certainly they shouldn't be below quarterbacks and linebackers, but at the same time, I don't know necessarily with our mid-season S tier criteria that they're up in the S tier. So I'm very comfortably, very firm. I would say maybe even the highest of the A's. Obviously, the quarterbacks are very nuanced, very skewed position, but I think I would give them an A+.
They were great.
I will say, I just want to say really quick, Jameson, I think Billy Bowman's an S tier player.
I was going to make that
without
exact point right now. There's no doubt in my mind he's an S. But the problem is the rest of the safety group as a whole for the whole season was not an S and they were not an A. I was a big Reggie Pearson believer. In all honesty, this season was a disappointment for him. I was really hoping for more. Key Lawrence, he showed some things, but was it a disappointment? Yes. Peyton Bowen showed some great things at the beginning of the season, but he got hurt. And then the kind of potential, the happiness that we got from a lot of his aggressiveness and his high football IQ plays, we didn't get to see a lot of that towards the end of the season, just due to sheer snap count as well as health. And we talked so much about this safety group being so like they're an S, and I don't even want to argue it at that point in the midseason because of the depth. The problem is we started to lose depth near the end of the season, and that made this safety room really struggle to where I could consider saying B. But the one thing that puts me over to get them to an A grade for me is the safeties are not supposed to be a group or position that go out and win you games. They're supposed to save you games a couple of times, but they don't go out and physically win you games. Billy Bowman won us 2 games, I think, with plays that he made. That hit that he did in the Texas game versus Tavian Sanders, such a big deal. And then obviously his pick 6, 99 yards or whatever it was, pick 6. Those are plays that you don't expect from a safety. Look at the NFL draft. I always use this as a barometer in terms of how important position groups are. You look at guys like quarterback, you look at defensive ends, edge rushers. Those are the guys that get picked early. Safeties, even the best of the best safeties fall in the draft because that in terms of defensive scheme, you can kind of have them not be as important. Like Derwin James dropped really to the mid-first round. Brian Branch last year dropped a lot, and these are guys that are extremely talented safeties. So whenever you have guys like Billy Bowman going out there and making plays like the way he did this year, that elevates it to an S+ for me, the way he played, and I can't give them anything less than an A just because of Billy Bowman. But for them as a whole, if Billy didn't go out to make those plays, I would consider a B, even though we were so high on them in the middle of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair. If you just kind of remove Bowman, that's a B unit. But Bowman,
it might have even been a high C at that point too.
But he was just so remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
You can't play that game because more playing time for Peyton Bowen might change things. You can play the what if game all day long, but the fact of the matter is Billy Bowman was a remarkable player. I would go as far as to say he's the most underrated player on the roster. Nationally didn't get the respect he deserved at all, I think, when it comes to awards. And
shout out
hopefully-
Paycom.
Hey, look, man, I can't do anything about that. Been a year free of them. Anyways, don't want to lose any sponsorship with the big green machine because they'll clearly sponsor us. But good luck with the class action lawsuit. Anyways, yeah, Billy Bowman's great.
Oh,
I will say the safeties as a group greatly benefited. And again, I wish maybe in the off season I'll have a whole pod that I can dedicate to breaking this down. But I greatly benefited from being one of the position groups on this team that is very heavily skewed towards people who come from ball nowhere states. If you break down this tier list, which I plan to do in a little bit and later, safeties, you're talking 2 dudes from Texas, a dude from Oklahoma, a dude from Michigan. They won the championship this year, ball nowhere state. And then unfortunately kind of held us back, but Bowen is in fact from Tennessee, which is a ball not nowhere state. But as a whole, very heavily skewed towards ball nowhere states.
Key Lawrence.
One of
Key-
them, yeah. Sorry, yes. Key Lawrence.
Key Lawrence is now at Ole Miss, by the way.
Everyone's at
Ball
all.
not nowhere university. I'll tell you that right now.
Ole
Shout out
Miss or
to
Tennessee?
shout out to Laramie Tunsil. He's in the clouds right now. He has not passed away. He's just smoking weed as he did on draft night. But anyways,
Got a big bank though. Let's just wrap a bow on this now. Kind of going back for our position groups at the end of the season. Right now, we have the quarterbacks. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna say it like this. So right now, we picked quarterbacks as an A tier. In the preseason, Ty and I ranked them as a B. In the middle of the season, we had them as an S. So kind of a little bit all over the place. Going, completely down the line. Linebackers, we have at an A. In the preseason, we had them as a B. And then in the middle of the season, we had them as an A. So seems like our opinions didn't change too much about them in the middle of the season, even though they really did take a drop off. But that's probably how high we thought of them in the middle of the season, as probably an A+. Moving on, safeties were an A. In the preseason, we had them as an A, almost an S. And then in the middle of the season, we had them an S. I'm going to say this for a really long time. We're going to go through a lot here, so just buckle up, guys. Wide receivers, this is a B in the end of the season. In the preseason, we had them as a C. In the middle of the season, we had them as an A. Was that an overreaction? Probably. Cornerbacks, we had as a B in the postseason. In the preseason, we had them as a B. In the middle of the season, we had them as an A. D-line was a C in the postseason. In the preseason, we had D-line as a B. In the middle of the season, we had them as a B. So they took a dip in their performance at the end of the season. Running backs are a C in the postseason. In the preseason, we thought highly of them at a B. In the middle of the season, we thought they were a D. Then the offensive line, we had them as a C in the postseason. In the preseason, we had them as a C. And in the middle of the season, we had them as a B. And then tight ends, the end of the season, had them as a D. In the middle of the season, somehow, some way, Ty convinced me to put them as a B tier. And then in the middle of the season, they went back to where they're supposed
No, that was
to be.
preseason B, midseason
Yes.
what?
Yes, preseason was B, and the midseason was D.
I was gonna say, there's no way in hell in October we had him in a B.
No, Ty convinced me in the
No.
preseason. Excuse me.
You're just trying to be nice, and you didn't have me to back you up.
There was nothing.
okay, there was no data point in the preseason either way.
I think Ty wanted to say an A for them, if I recall.
I did.
I
I think a B was a compromise. Actually,
I think the club hand, might have fooled you all.
Yeah, and plus, obviously, the personal relationship bias that he had was Stogner.
Of course.
hey,
All right.
You know what? You guys gave certain defensive players a ton of props for generating 6 points. Tight ends generated 12 points.
Oh,
So-
wow.
Oh my god.
It's crazy. But
What?
I think looking at that ranking, I think that is a solid group. Is it exceptional? No. Is it a successful group, Bobby? I wouldn't consider it a successful group of football players, but everyone else has their different opinions.
Oh, geez. No, I mean, the season was what it was. I don't think it was as bad as I don't think it was a failure. I don't think it was like an outright failure. For the context, I think if you want to look at a macro of like what OU football should be, then yeah, I mean, we don't want to be an Alamo Bowl program. Nobody does. Or I mean, maybe some people do. I'm sure Baylor or Kansas would be hype about that. But ultimately, given context, I don't think it's a failure. I think it's the right step. If we're right back in that same type of situation next year, which it's going to be hard to evaluate with the move to the SEC, then yeah, not great. But ultimately, I think the unit was a success. I thought they showed growth. I thought they let down themselves at a couple times during the season, but it's college football. It's a game of tight margins. So
that's fair. All right. I think we can kind of wrap up this podcast. Bobby, can I sign us out since I hosted this for the majority of it?
Yes, which is a good idea because I'm itching to ask about Nick Saban, and we know we're gonna go another 30. We're gonna go another 30 if we talk about Saban and DeBoer. So Jameson, unless Ty has anything to say.
No, you shouldn't have brought that up. You can't say I'm going to talk about Nick Saban. Anyways, Ty, you got anything to say? It's just again, that'll be an off-season pod. We might talk about Nick Saban versus OU history or something.
Right.
Like
that. We should bring on old Bowden Blake just to talk about the
noted Nick Saban expert.
Well, no, just to talk about the carousel because it's been a bit wild out there. But
yeah.
Anyways, Jameson, close us out here. Great job hosting, by the way. This was fun.
It was another fun one. Obviously, doing tier maker pods. Is it lazy? A little bit, but we love the content. So
we could be lazier. We could do more. We could absolutely do more.
And we will do more. So buckle up for off-season content, everybody. We will be talking about other sports. I understand OU was playing a basketball game while we are live. We'll continue to talk about OU and their other sports. We love talking about softball whenever it comes up. So just get buckled up and ready because we're going to talk about all things OU every single week for this offseason. But it was a fun one talking about the football team. And this is the Schooner Pod. So everyone, thank you for listening. And remember, subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on all of your podcast channels. So this is Schooner Pod. Boomer Sooner.